My name's Gillian Breslin. I'm a writer. I've written for Intersections, Foreplay. I write for a radio comedy show. I've just written a book that's coming out. So I've written for various media. Thank you. And apparently I'm short. So what I'm going to talk to you about is not necessarily specifics about writing for reality. It's more about telling a story, because the principles that you use for telling a story are the same whatever genre you're working in. So reality, ads, drama, comedy, a lot of the elements can be applied across genres. And I'm old school, so I'm on cue cards, not on computers. So Anton's told us broadly what reality is. Basically, it's real people in real situations to manipulate it to various degrees. And if everything is real, why do we need writers? Because the fact of the matter is reality can be very boring. It can be tedious. Writers are your storytellers. They're the ones who take the footage you have and order it. Create a story, create a comprehensive narrative, create something that your audience can engage with and that they can understand in their broadest ideas of what storytelling is. So actual reality is tedious. It's tedium. It's hours of tedium. And our job is to take it, structure it, make it accessible as writers. Often writers and editors are fulfilling the same function in reality television, because you're taking hours and hours and hours and then putting it into an arc. You can't always write it beforehand. Often it's done in post. So your writers and your editors are working quite closely together, and your producers. So we're taking unfiltered reality and turning it into a coherent, interesting, and recognizable story so that our audience can relate to it. And every story, whether the drama, sitcom, novel, play, advert, reality show, they have a couple of common elements. But before we go into that, let's talk about our audience for a second. They've actually done a lot of audience research on reality TV to figure out why people watch it. It's something that baffles researchers and writers, to be honest. And they've come up with three main reasons why people watch reality television. The first is voyeurism. We like standing on the outside, looking at real people in real situations and seeing how they react. We like, and especially humiliating, interesting, dangerous, things that are never going to happen to us. We get a little kick out of watching real people in those situations. And the next reason why people watch it is companionship. Now that sounds weird, right? Watching television for companionship. But because these are real people, just like us, we can identify with them, we can get to know them, and we can form relationships with them. So in Survivor or Amazing Race, when you want somebody to win, you want them to win because you see a little bit of yourself in them, or you can relate to something they've gone through in their lives. Because they're real people, we can form stronger bonds with these characters. And then the final reason why people watch is vengeance. We like revenge. We like it when the bully gets kicked out. We like it when a cheater gets caught. And because we run into those people in our own lives, we like it when they get payback, even if it's just on television, because it makes us believe that in our own lives, the people who are giving us shit all the time are eventually going to get their comeuppance, that the bad guys in our life are going to get their reward. And so it's very gratifying on television when a bad guy gets caught out, or gets booted off, or gets their immunity idol taken away. So that's what our audiences are watching for. And knowing that means that as writers and story constructors, we can give them what they want. So that's the audience. That's what your audience is going into a reality show expecting. Those are their expectations, and it's our job to deliver on those expectations. Isn't that exciting? Now, when you're telling a story, you've got to know what your audience wants. But there's also certain ways that stories are constructed. Every story has 5 basic elements. And when you're looking at your reality television show, you've got to go in and look at these building blocks and think about how you can put them together to construct the strongest possible story. The first thing is character. It sounds a bit weird to talk about character in a reality setting, because after all, these are real people. To a certain degree. I mean, what your editors are doing and what your producers are doing are taking elements of those real people and constructing a persona for them. In reality television, stereotypes are our friends. They really are, like a jock, a nerd, a geek, a princess, a bad guy, a good guy. It lets our audience know what to expect, who they should be rooting for, whose side they should be on, who is going to win, who's not going to win. So constructing those characters gives you an engine on with which to drive your story. As a writer, even if you're coming in after the fact, get to know those characters, get to know their backstories, get to know why they're on the show. Do your research. I cannot emphasize this enough. Research, research, research. Always know everything before you even put pen to paper. Because that can give you story elements that you never even anticipated. If somebody's there because they want to glorify the name of their dying sister, that's a fantastic story. I mean, it's a little heartless, but it's also a fantastic story that you can bring up later on. If you don't know your characters, you don't know what story you have to play with. So always get to know the real people. The second story element to think about is setting. Setting is the world that your reality show is playing out in. A setting can be either a physical setting, like New York, or a cake shop, or it can be a more kind of constructed setting, like The Apprentice is set in New York, but it's also set in the business world, right? So it's place and it's idea. So give me some examples. Yeah? Now The Bachelor is interesting because it's set in that beautiful house, but the setting for the concept for the show is the world of dating, right? It's romance. It's set in the world of romance. Any other ideas? Sorry? Jersey-licious, guilty pleasure. It's set in a salon, but it's also set very specifically in New Jersey and in a very specific subset of New Jersey, right? The glam makeup idea. So your setting is not just that salon, it's in this world of women who spray tan and do weird things to their hair, nails, and eyes. Anyone else? Yep?
Big Brother, where the setting is sort of rivalry in the house.
Exactly.
Just be normal people living together and what really happens between the characters clashing.
I mean, Big Brother is an interesting thing because the setting is so basic. It's a house. But it's the social interactions becomes very much a part of that setting because you've locked people in. You've literally given them nowhere else to go, so they have to fight and talk and sleep with each other.
Third degree, cutting edge.
Okay, Third Degree is set in the world of hard news, right? So it's yeah. And Third Degree is interesting because you expect more from it. You expect it to be real and truthful, more than any, I think, of the other reality genres we're talking about. So the setting there is the world of hard-hitting journalism. Okay? Anyone else? Amazing Race? Your setting is the world. Yeah. The world and the world of travel. So you see what I'm saying? Setting isn't just about place. It dictates the kind of meaning you want to get from your show. It dictates the content that you're going to pull from your show. So a show set in the world of business is going to play very differently from a world set in a New Jersey nail shop. You know, it talks to different storylines, different expectations from your audience, and different expectations from your characters. The next thing to consider is plot. Your plot is basically a sequence of events that take you through your beginning, your middle, and your end of your show. Whether it's 5 minutes, 30 seconds, 10 minutes, you need a sequence of events to take you from a beginning to an end, and hopefully through a middle. The middle is generally the easiest part of your plot. It's the beginning and the end that are quite complicated. In reality television, so let's talk about that, the beginning, the middle, and the end. In reality television, usually the beginning would be where you introduce your characters, the setting, and their problem. What needs to be solved in this episode?
So in a makeover show, the problem is, how do we get this person from frump to fabulous, you know? Big Brother has a much bigger overarching plot of who's going to win that money, but within each episode, they set challenges for their contestants. And how they get through the challenges to a conclusion where somebody's eliminated is your plot, right? So it's a series of events leading to a conclusion. The middle would be where they would try and work through those obstacles and either succeed or fail. And the end would be your resolution. Resolution does not always have to be positive. You don't always need a happy ending. Failure is resolution as well. So if somebody fails in, I don't know, making over a house or making over a person or gets eliminated, that's a resolution. But you have to say to your audience, this is where our story for this stops. It's done now. We can move on next week. You need to give them a point where they know that we don't have to think about this the next time the show comes up. And the fourth story element is conflict, which you mentioned. Conflict is a fantastic plot driver. You always want conflict in your story. But conflict isn't necessarily just between people, right? Conflict can be between one of your characters, what they want and what they need. So somebody mentioned maid as an example. You know, often you'll get somebody who wants to be a surfer or a rapper or a hip-hop artist or whatever. That's what they ultimately want. But the conflict comes in from how much work they're prepared to do to get to that point, right? So they're not necessarily fighting with other people. The conflict can be an internal one. Can somebody give me examples from reality shows of conflict that work, that make you really remember? Cheaters. Cheaters is fantastic for conflict, yeah? Yeah? Running with the? Oh, okay. Is it between people or is it internal conflict? Between people. Okay. In the yellow shirt, and then you? Kumblakaya, yeah. Yeah. And don't you find with Kumblakaya the episodes where there's deep hurt work a lot better than the ones where it's kind of like, okay, I forgive you, let's move on. Yeah. Yep. But the Bachelor doesn't just rely on interpersonal conflict between people. There's also the Bachelor's own conflict of who he's going to choose. And don't you think it's fantastic when he has a tough choice to make? It's far more interesting where he's just like, I want that one. So it's an internal conflict and an interpersonal conflict. And that's fantastic. That's a great story driver. The other kind of conflict that you can create in reality television is a conflict between your end goal and the amount of time you have to do it in. So something like Extreme Makeover, where they have to build a house in 5 days. You know, you're going to get a happy ending, all the builders love each other, it's all very kumbaya, but the big conflict is are they going to finish in time? So that creates your whole overarching story narrative, your arc, is these armies of people trying to build a house before those 5 days are up. And that's a great conflict. It's a very simple one. And then your final element of story structure is your resolution. I've talked a little bit about that. Once you've set up an expectation for your audience, your resolution has to answer that expectation or that question. Otherwise, they feel cheated, and you have a really tough time finding your ending. Resolution also provides your audience with emotional release. You've asked them to invest in your show for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes. They've invested, they've followed these real characters throughout their journey. The resolution says to them, okay, emotionally, you can disengage now. You can walk away, you know how things have ended. It gives them a point at which they can go, I'm satisfied now. Anything else? Any other questions? So all these factors are what play into your dramatic structure. What do I mean by dramatic structure? Anyone? It's basically how your story runs. You're working on generally on a 3-act structure, beginning, middle, end. The first part of your structure is generally exposition. You're basically saying to your audience, this is the characters, this is the situation they find themselves in, this is the question that we're going to answer, right?
So let's talk about creative ways in which reality shows do that. Who do you think has the best way of exposition? What is the most memorable way to start a reality show in your mind? What do you remember? Which shows do you remember? Mm-hmm. Jackass, right. Yeah, very simply. Steve-O is going to do something dumb and quite possibly dangerous. Yeah, you know immediately, yeah? Yes, yeah. These people are all shit at cooking and Gordon's going to shout at them, yeah? Anyone else? Yeah? Yeah. And Survivor also does it very well in that you can kind of see the progression of where people are physically in your intro, because it's actually a visual thing that you can see. So you know who's weak, who's probably going to get voted off, and then they set up a challenge, and usually when they're starving, it's a physical challenge. So you know that it's going to be like interesting television. Anyone else? Yeah? Extreme Makeover, yeah. Extreme Makeover is great because they're, I don't know, like 8 series in. Every single episode starts in the same way, with a bunch of people, the makeover team on the bus, watching a tear-jerking video about a very sad family and planning the exact same thing every week, and yet you still watch it because those families are different. Sometimes their houses are radioactive or have been hit by like tsunami or whatever. So it feeds into your desire for disaster porn, but you also know that you're going to get a happy ending in the end. And this poor family with their kids in butters and that kind of thing are going to come home to a great house. And it's exactly the same every week, and we still watch it. A great intro, great exposition, comes from a very strong premise. You've got to know what your show is about so that you can do your introduction, give an introduction to it. If you don't know what story you're trying to tell, how do you expect to tell your audience? So with Extreme Makeover, we're going to build a family a house. That is your premise. Maid, we are going to turn this teenager into that. Kumbalakaya, we're going to solve this, right? Kardashians, we're going to watch the Kardashians be stupid. You know, it's very, very simple. Let's take this opportunity quickly to talk about ethics in creation of reality show. Because I personally would never have made toddlers and tiaras. It freaks me out. There has to be a certain ethical element to your work as filmmakers. I could never, and it's got to be personal. I mean, obviously you can't, people sign release forms and put themselves in danger. Fear factor, I think, skirts a very narrow line, particularly when they're putting people in actual danger. As youngsters, as young first-time filmmakers, I would be wary about creating a format where you're going to be putting people in danger. If you hurt people, it probably won't be selected as a format. Think about your, I'm not going to dictate your ethics. Think about how far you are prepared to go. And there are certain elements and transgressions that you should be very wary of. And certain things just won't make it to air, you know. So ask your mentors and your teachers and stuff about where that line would be if you're thinking of skirting it. Always, by the way, and get consent forms. Even with the camera show afterwards, after you've shot people, you need to get a release form from them to say that they don't mind being on camera. So to recap, in your first part of your show, you want to show on screen your main character or characters dealing with a dramatic incident which affects their life and which has to be solved. And that sets up your dramatic question for the episode. It's called the inciting incident, so if you want to do some reading up, figuring out what is involved, and this is true, by the way, for reality and drama. It's the same formula. It's the same mode of storytelling. The middle part of your story is the rise and action. This is when your characters try and solve the problems you've shown, and if you're a good reality producer or storyteller, you're going to throw obstacles in their way. Again, that comes down to knowing your character and doing some research. So if you're doing a makeup over show and you know that somebody hates spandex, You obviously are going to put them in a spandex outfit and show them freaking out. You know, it's creating drama for television and obstacles for television. And then your final is the resolution, your character's success or failure. You've answered the question that you set up in your dramatic question. So the structure along with your 5 story elements will help you create your reality format. It's your template. It's how your episodes are going to work every week. How are you going to set up your characters? How are you going to set up your show? What obstacles are you going to throw in their way? And how are you going to show the resolution? It's very simple. And watch reality television. You'll see how simplistic that formula is. But when you get the right elements together, it makes for great television. And when you're creating that format, you need to think about what you want your show to achieve. It's the same thing I was talking about with Anton. What is your society talking about at the moment? What would you like to see reflected on television? And what are you going to say about that? So if it's a culture of celebrity, if it's weight loss, if it's... Zoomosphere. You could do a whole reality show on people painting politicians with their willies out. So most successful reality television says something about the world. It doesn't just show a slice of life, it actually has a point to make about the society we live in. So like I mentioned, Idol succeeded because it tapped into the idea of the American dream. Secret Millionaire succeeds because of very rigid class structures in Britain, and it allows us to watch people transgressing those class structures. And then when you're writing your script, think about your stakes. What's there to win or lose? What are your characters competing for? It doesn't always have to be life or death. It doesn't always have to be $1 million. It could be something as simple as a makeover, or a new hairstyle, or feeling better about themselves. But in your script, you need to make sure that to the audience and to the participants, it feels like life or death. If they fail to get that prize, their life will be irrevocably different. A key element of a successful reality show is surprise. Set up expectations for your audience, then subvert them. The producers also blindside the contestants. They think they're being merged, they don't merge them. They think they're being split into teams, they get split into different teams. And the whole point of surprise is to make, if your audience knows what's going to happen in every single piece of your program, you failed. You need to constantly engage the interest of your audience. The Amazing Race producers are very clever. Like often, I mean, they deliberately choose them to fly to one place that only has 2 flights a day, you know, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. Like if you miss that flight, then you're screwed. So the Amazing Race is incredibly well orchestrated in terms of plot twists and turns and things that could go horribly, disastrously wrong, and great visuals and that kind of thing. Amazing Race is a good show to watch just in terms of structuring an episode. It's the reason they've won all those Emmys. Made, at the end of Made, they always compete in a competition. If they lose the competition, that's, well, it should be a surprise, but generally they do lose the competition. But it's a plot twist. I directed an episode of Culture Shock. I don't know if anyone's seen that show. Where a white family from Florida swapped with a black family from Yeovil. Things were great, 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 and then they had a massive fight. Completely unscripted, unexpected, fantastic plot twist. We could hang the whole episode off that moment. And that's it.